and you're the only one who's struggling or suffering. And I think this is actually one of the biggest reasons that that I wrote Lost and Founder, is to help people feel less alone for having these challenges and these problems. That, you know, this is something we universally experience, and a ton of startup success is actually just luck.
All right, hey guys, we have the most amazing Rand Fishkin here with us. And if you've never heard of Moz, you're obviously not in the SEO space. So Rand Fishkin is the founder of Moz, and recently he is the founder of SparkToro, a data and software company helping people understand where to reach their target audiences. And also, I'm a big fan of his book, Lost and Founder, a painfully honest guide to the startup world. So Rand Fishkin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Bob.
Yeah.
Good to be here.
So yeah, just for my audience, so I'm interviewing Rand on behalf of Next Academy, which I am the head of growth. So Next Academy have over 2,000 graduates for digital marketing and coding, and we are sort of the largest coding academy here in Southeast Asia. And a lot of startup entrepreneurs and a lot of founders come out of our academy. So it was a great fit to interview Rand on the startup culture and his experience, with Moz. Yeah. So Rand, I really find your story inspiring. How you started your company with your mom, and you were at one point $500,000 in debt.
Yeah.
And how as an entrepreneur, a lot of times, as an entrepreneur, we do find ourselves in debt. And in an Asian culture, it's sort of a thing that we are ashamed of. We are not transparent. We don't even tell people about our struggles. So how did you pull through? How did you sort of navigate through, going through debt and believing in your idea?
Yeah, I think the real answer is that at that time I felt a lot of shame as well. I felt like I couldn't talk about it, couldn't be honest about it. And I think that makes the problem only worse, right? Because you feel like you're the only one. You feel like everybody else, in the startup world or entrepreneurship is doing great, and you're the only one who's struggling or suffering. And I think this is actually one of the biggest reasons that I wrote Lost and Founder, is to help people feel less alone for having these challenges and these problems. That, this is something we universally experience. And a ton of startup success is actually just luck, right? It is. It's not that someone else is better than you, or that they made, smarter decisions. It could be that their timing was just right, their network was right, they were in the right place at the right time, and I think that we have to recognize some of those things and attribute those things the way they should be. Even Bill Gates, right, says, hey, a ton of my success, a ton of Microsoft success is the right place at the right time. I got really lucky, and I think that's absolutely true. As far as being in debt goes and working through that, for me, that for my mom and I, we really didn't feel like we had a choice. You can, of course, declare bankruptcy, but that goes on your on your debt record, and we were trying to keep our debt secret from a lot of people, and so from family in particular, and so we felt like we just had to push through it and find a way to pay back those big sums. And eventually that worked out, but I think that was a long shot, right? This is one of the reasons that I don't want to go into debt anymore. I pay all my bills on time now. Never carry any debt load.
Great stuff. I love your book and how you talk about your whole journey founding Moz and the mistakes you made and what you would have done differently. So it's a great learning, and I wish everyone in Asia, especially I'm in the startup and tech scene, so everyone in Asia has your book. And in Asia, we also have like the big unicorns. In Malaysia, something that came out from my country is called Grab, which is the Uber in Asia. And of course, everyone knows Alibaba, and there are things like Traveloka, Gojek, which is the Uber in Indonesia. So everyone here aspires, to be the unicorn. So I just want to get your thoughts on, you don't always, have to be that unicorn, and that is very much covered in the book.
Yeah. In fact, I think that most people, I think 99% of entrepreneurs probably should not try to be those unicorns. One of the things that entrepreneurship provides, right? The independence and ability to control your own destiny, and the ability to set the company culture the way that you want, and to build something that you want to exist in the world. Those are all wonderful things, and they don't require billions of dollars. They don't require market domination. They don't require you to be a monopoly. You can do all of those things with a small team, with people that you want to work with, building the kind of company you want to build. Financially speaking, a company that is a unicorn, sometimes those companies make founders a lot more money, and sometimes they don't. There are plenty of founders who have been part of early journeys of startups and then found themselves, pushed out along the way, and owning less and less stock, and diluted over and over again by new investors coming in and new classes of shares coming in. And so there is just a real misunderstanding in the startup world that you can have a bootstrapped company, or a company that's funded via debt, or a company that's crowdfunded, or a company that is funded just from angel investors or friends and family, or some of the new alternatives that are out there, like Tiny Seed Fund, which my wife and I invested in. These formats of building a company can be, just as, if not more so, just as exciting, and they give you a much better survival rate, right? I think one of the terrible things about trying to be a unicorn is that almost everyone fails, right? The failure rates are 95+%. If you look at venture-backed companies, right, venture-backed tech startups that have raised money from an institutional investor, 95% of them fail to deliver the minimum rate of return that is required by the investor. Those odds are terrible odds. You can dramatically increase your odds of being successful by having a different definition of success, and by not having to raise money from institutional capital.
Yeah, and in your book, you extensively cover the downsides of venture capital funding, to downsides of raising money. Can we briefly talk about this? So, because in Asia, it's still a very big thing, to raise money, and lots of money in Asia, because the population here is still emerging, so emerging in terms of the economy. So there is a lot of fundraising going around. Unlike Silicon Valley, it's just starting here,
Yeah, I think that entrepreneurs need to ask themselves what they want to build and why, right? And venture capital, any investor will tell you, venture capital is wrong for 99% of companies. The problem is it's marketed to 100% of entrepreneurs. And so a lot of us are biased to think that venture or growth equity are the right ways to go for, and we try and build our companies in a way that we can raise venture, instead of building our companies toward the goal of profitability. And once you're a profitable company, you have long-term sustainability. There is no longer a runway to worry about. There is no longer do you need to have a concern of, am I meeting my investors' expectations? Am I going to be fired from my job as CEO, or fired by my company if I'm in a founder and executive role? Those concerns go out the window. So I think it just pays to question the prevailing notion of what it takes to be an entrepreneur. There are a lot of wonderful companies that have either not raised money or raised alternative forms of capital, and I hope that, I hope that the Asian market can sort of learn from the American market's experience and go, hang on a minute, we don't need to be crazy like them. Like, let's take this a little more intelligently, and plot out what we want to build.
Yeah, and build like strategic partnerships with your investors, and understand the motivations of investors, and make sure they look out for you, not just their portfolio.
I mean, make sure that those things are aligned. I think that oftentimes in the early stages, it can feel like you're very aligned with your investors, and then as you grow, as the business changes, as you both see what the business can become, those interests can diverge pretty dramatically. And so there's a lot of, it's a relationship built on trust. And I had a great relationship with Moz's investors. I think that they were some of the best people in the venture world. I think incredibly highly of them. And when my friends say like, hey, I want to raise venture, I definitely say, yeah, you should talk to them. I think Ignition was good. I think Founder is good, but just the structure of venture capital is very prohibitive in terms of what kind of company you can build. There's only one path to success, and that is incredibly fast hyper growth, which very few companies can achieve.
Yeah, great stuff. And the most painful, not painful thing, but the most painful thing that I read in your book is you talk about your potential exit with HubSpot, and like the almost exit, the acquisition offer from HubSpot. And that was there was such a good thing that you shared. Not many people who have shared that. And in Asia, I can tell you it's the same thing. It's the same culture here that, startup founders don't exit. It's because they said, we have to keep the dream going. We have to keep the money going. And, exits are sometimes even laughed upon, or even like have bad press. So it is important, to balance having like the venture capital fund, but also bear in mind if it's not very good if you want to exit early. So what of your thoughts on your entrepreneurs exiting?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the core things that you need to keep in mind as an entrepreneur is that exit opportunities are few and far between. They are hard to come by, and if you have an offer, even if it's not everything you ever dreamed it would be, but it is sort of life-changing for you and your team and your family and your future, it might be the right thing to say yes early on. I think one of the things that a lot of founders don't realize is that you get a lot of stabs at this, right? You get to build multiple companies over your life. You don't just get one. And if you take an early exit opportunity, you are going to be far better set up for doing whatever you want, long-term, short-term, exit, no exit, in future companies, right? Because you've removed a lot of that short-term financial pressure for you and your partners and family and people in your lives, and that's a really powerful thing. I think that the struggle of reflecting on years and years of saying no to an offer and feeling like, gosh, what would that experience have been like? What did we miss out on? What would it have been like to not be scared about our financial future and the financial future of sort of people around us for a long time? That's pretty enticing.
Yeah. Thank you for being so transparent in the book, and I really love that. And one of the things that you continuously say in the book is that it is quite challenging to earn a lot of money or being lucrative, even as a founder of a $50 million revenue company. So that's great insight to a lot of people. That should be a great learning to everyone here in Asia. And thank you for sharing that. It's not always the right thing, not always the most lucrative thing to be a CEO of a $50 million per year company.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird, right? That I think that a lot of people think they see Moz. I think Moz will maybe do, $55 million in revenue this year. And it's sort of odd to have this expectation that, Rand started the company with his mom. They collectively own, whatever it is, 35% of it. They must have money, right? And the reality is not quite, right? Like maybe someday, knock on wood, hopefully someday Moz has a great exit and maybe that does come true. But whether it'll be as good as that, that HubSpot offer, hard to say. It might not.
Yeah. I wish you all the best, and hopefully after 2 years you'll have like Lost and Founder Part 2 and talk about your exit.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. One of the chapters one of the things that I really love from the book is also like you say, you always, as a founder or CEO, you always don't get to do what you love. You might be starting out, loving SEO, doing marketing, and as a founder or CEO, you might eventually be doing, running a company or fulfilling a vision. And that's a great point that I really got out of the book. So can you tell my audience more about, if the challenges of being a CEO?
Yeah. So basically, what I find over and over again is that lots of people who build companies, especially in the early stages, are really good at doing whatever work it is that's required to build a company in that sector. So it might be, wow, this person is a phenomenal content creator, phenomenal service provider, or they are wonderful at transactions and understanding, whatever it is, logistics, right? They're a great logistics person. But as you become a larger and larger company, as your company scales, especially, in sort of classic venture world where you're aiming for hyper growth, so you're hiring very fast and adding a lot of people and complexity to your team.
Sorry, Rand, you just froze.
Enablement.
Yeah.
Oh, can you see me now?
Yeah. Now it's great. I think you might need to repeat your last 10 seconds. Just froze. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I see saying internet connections unstable. Give me just a sec. Let me see if I can clean it up.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. No worries. Now it's great.
Okay, looks good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, basic story here is that when you are first building your company, you might be really good at the things that are required to build a company in that sector. And you might be very passionate about those things, right? I built a company in the SEO world. I love SEO. I love learning about the ins and outs of how Google and web marketing work. I love, showing people, running experiments and showing people how particular things work and exposing the sort of underbelly of Google's operations. But that is not the work that's required of a CEO of a 200-person company, right? That's really different. And I think it can be very frustrating if you, as an entrepreneur, go into this, company building world thinking that you're going to get to do the work that you love, rather than you're going to do a lot of work that you're not good at, don't like, maybe even hate, because you're enabling the vision of what the company can eventually be, right? You're trying to build a team and build processes and build structures and set strategy and, tell messages over and over to your team and to the outside world. CEO is a very different kind of job than individual contributor. And so if you love the work of building an early stage company, you don't necessarily love the work of scaling that company in later stages.
Yeah, that's a great point, and absolutely love that in the book. So that, because I know a lot of founders who scale and then they struggle to cope, so like don't really love what they do anymore. So.
Yeah, I mean, this is another wonderful thing, right? If you don't raise capital, you don't have those sort of capital return requirements, and so you are much more free to build a company that can stay small, that can stay agile, that can be whatever you want it to be. And sometimes that means that you get to do whatever kind of work you want to do, which is awesome too. And frankly, I think the world needs a lot more small companies. I like small companies. I don't like going to Starbucks. I like going to the independent coffee shop, right? I don't love buying from Amazon and Walmart. I like finding some independent retailer that, is doing something super cool in my neighborhood. If that's you, maybe small business is the way to go.
Yeah, thanks for saying you don't like going to Starbucks. You're the first person that I talked to that's from Seattle, so that's great to hear. And
yeah, Seattle, Starbucks is not popular in Seattle, right? Like here, we're kind of like, oh my God, Starbucks, no, you got to go to an independent shop. We have great coffee here, but that's not where you get it.
Yeah. It's the same here. Like great, we love great independent businesses. I love family-run businesses. That's where most of the heart is and most of the craft is, and I love that until they're acquired sometimes. But
I mean, that's where you get, right? Yeah, like that's where you get great food. That's where you get great products. That's where you get great innovation, and it all feels kind of generic and the same when you get the really big scale companies.
Yeah, great stuff. And one of the points that I really like from your book is you said that the strengths and weaknesses of the founder would actually eventually transcend to the company. And I really love that whole chapter of the book. Can you briefly, in a summarized way, tell my audience how that is?
Sure. Yeah, the basic issue here is that as a founder, you come with your personal human baggage, your emotions, your style, the way you operate, the things you're good at and not good at. And as a founder, you transfer those things onto your company in ways that you might not always realize. Mm-hmm. And I think many startup founders and many startup teams don't realize how the culture that's been created at the startup is innately tied to who the founders are and where they have emotional intelligence and where they might lack that. And it can be very tough to unravel those things and then to be realistic about facing the consequences, right? To say, gosh, this attribute of Rand has embedded itself in Moz's culture, and it's not a good thing. I'll give you an example. One of the things, Bob, that I was always terrible at, was letting people go when I should have. Yeah. Right? Saying, this person is not a right fit for the company. We probably shouldn't have hired them, or whatever it is. We're changing in a way that they no longer, are the right match for what we're building. And I did not do that. And I think as a result, Moz oftentimes had a culture that was, where expectations were not clear, and responsibility for doing the right work wasn't always clear. People who probably should have been let go, months or years ago stayed on far too long, and that meant that, they weren't a right fit with the rest of the company. That's no good for them, and it was no good for us. And and recognizing those things in yourself, right? Having the self-awareness to say, oh, I'm responsible for that. I need to fix that. That's hard. That's a hard thing to do. You got to look yourself.
Yeah, no worries.
The connection seems to be a little funky. Okay, looks good again.
Yeah, no worries. We'll power through. It's okay.
Okay.
And so a lot of, you said just now, some of the weaknesses do transcend, and in the book you do talk about some of your technical difficulties mastering technical stuff, like understanding tech and software engineering. So as an academy that teaches a full stack web development coding program, so we teach people how to code from the front end to Python to build applications. So should tech founders, my question is, learn to code before they start a company?
Let's see. I think it is helpful for sure, but not absolutely required. I know plenty of founders who are relatively non-technical. either they only know the very basics of coding, but they don't write any of their own code for the company, or they don't at all. I think what's crucial though is that you, even if you are not actually writing the commands, right, and programming in the language that is being used in your company, if you don't have a good understanding of software engineering and how the architecture of an application is built, that is problematic. I think it is okay if you don't understand it going in, but when you start working with your team, they should be able to cogently and cohesively explain it to you, and you should be able to grasp those concepts and have a great understanding, so that when you are talking to your engineers about how long something is going to take to build, or how it's being architected, or why it's being done that way, you can understand what they're talking about. You can provide suggestions and input. You can ask good questions and dumb questions without fear of repercussion or reprisal.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's crucial, and that's not just true in tech, right? That's true. It's true in marketing and in sales and in growth. It's true in finance. It's true in operations and logistics and hiring. Like all of these things, you sort of need to have enough knowledge to be dangerous. Otherwise, you can quickly be overrun by debt in those areas.
Yeah, and it's not. I love the story where your CEO actually took interest into the software engineering and learned to understand the technical parts by herself. That's the amazing part of the book. So I love my favorite chapter, of course, as a person in marketing, is the chapter about growth hacking. And you talk about your experiences with growth hacking, and it's still a big part of startup culture here in Asia. So can you share with us your experiences with growth hacking?
Yeah. So I think the principles behind growth hacking and finding growth hacks have been that it's very short-term focused, right? You're essentially trying to find this one weird tactic that you can use to get a bunch of users or customers or people paying you. And my experience and the experience of lots of other company founders has been that those tactics generally only work for a limited amount of time, and they often have ugly externalities on the rest of the business. So I talk about this in the book a bunch as it relates to Moz, but I think that this is a fundamental flaw in the way you think about marketing. If you think about marketing as, how do I find that one weird trick that's going to bring me all my customers, you will almost certainly fail. Even if you find that trick and it starts to work, you will almost certainly fail in the future. If instead you are building a sustainable, what I call a flywheel, right? A structure that you can invest in over and over again and get increasing returns with decreasing effort. Meaning, I am putting in the same amount of work each week, each month, each day to acquiring new customers or acquiring new users, driving traffic to my site. And as I put in that same amount of work, I'm getting more and more people out of it because the process builds on itself. Or alternatively, you are investing less work over time and seeing increasing returns, even better, right? That's a flywheel that's scaling with decreasing friction. You're getting better at doing whatever kinds of marketing. It could be advertising or press and PR or events and conferences or content marketing or SEO, whatever types of investment, email marketing, right? Building a great email list and operating off of that. All of those tactics can be invested in ways that scale with decreasing friction. And boy, the difference is huge when you have a sustainable marketing practice versus a one-time hack that goes down, that stops working over time.
Yeah, and I think everyone should get your book to listen to the story of your growth hack for Moz or your growth hack for Yelp. It's such an amazing story. And I think one of the the keys to growing Moz was that you you put out a lot of content and you build an audience, throughout the years, whether it's through email or through YouTube videos and other channels. So I want to ask you, you seem, I love your content. I've been following for many years, and I love your keynotes. So like, how do you come up with content ideas, and how do you have the ability to speak to your audience?
I mean, certainly a lot of that is practice, right?
Yeah.
When you do it for a long period of time, I think I've been creating content for marketers for 16 years almost at this point. Yeah. And I was terrible at it for year 1, 2, 3, and then I got kind of good in year 4, 5, 6, and then eventually pretty darn good. And I think that a big part of that is empathy for an audience, right? So being able to say like, gosh, I have conversations with a lot of startup founders, a lot of CMOs, a lot of web marketers, a lot of SEOs, a lot of content creators. And I hear over and over again the same frustrations and challenges and concerns and issues and lack of understanding around something. And so when I find those, I can go dig into those areas and talk to people in my network who've done a great job of solving them, or find case studies of people who've done a good job and try and reverse engineer why that is, and then produce content that makes those concepts easily explainable and accessible to people. I think that's kind of at the core of content marketing. It's also at the core of product development, right? I think in order to build a great product, you have to have deep customer empathy. Mm-hmm. Right? Being able to put yourselves in their shoes, imagine the problems they're having, imagine why they're having those problems, and then be able to correctly work out solutions to those problems that will help make their lives better, right? Whether that's an enterprise business, and we're going to make their lives better through this complex software, or it's a consumer who needs to travel from point A to point B, and we're going to find a great way to get them to offer them something that's affordable and scalable and reusable, that's a good experience. And that same product empathy, I think that's what helps me do marketing and content creation.
Yep. So I love your story in the book, your transparency on the Moz Analytics story. So it's so important to put yourself in your customer's shoes. Can you briefly tell us the story about understanding your customer and how it affected product development for you?
Yeah, sure. So in the book, I tell an anecdote about something I did with a friend of mine. We called it CEO swap. So I went and ran his company, which was a consulting agency out in Philadelphia for a week, and he went and ran Moz, my software company in Seattle, for a week. And as I spent a lot of time with his team members and the people doing, the SEO work, I saw that many of my assumptions about the market, about my customers, did their work, was not correct. And seeing that in person, living that experience, in this kind of funny, odd way, was very illuminating for me, and I think helped me to see the problem, the challenges that Moz was facing with this Moz Analytics product, a product that we spent 2+ years building, and when we finally launched, it was pretty much a dud for at least the first 6 months after launch, and it took a long time to sort of get back to a good place. Now, lesson learned, right? I think as I'm building SparkToro, I am trying to talk to and watch and observe and do the work of my customers every week. Right? Every week for me is talk to a bunch of people who do marketing of all kinds and see how they discover attributes of their audience, how they figure out where to target them, and then try and build a tool that does a good job to help them.
Yeah. I'll give you an insight being part of this world. So when it comes to MarTech or any SaaS software, first of all, it's quite unaffordable here. For us, paying anything in US dollars is quite you have to be a sizable company to afford that.
Sure, that makes sense.
Like HubSpot and everything, or things like SEMrush, it's quite very pricey for us. So we are in the end where, even being in a small medium company, we are very well versed with all the free alternatives. So you can ask me for any feedback on that. We are every Asian company is very well versed with the free alternatives. It takes a lot for us to eventually jump to pay. Secondly, is that a lot of tools that are developed in the West don't have the insights we need here. You don't have our data. You don't have our interest targeting. You don't have a lot of things that works very well. A lot of software works very well in the West. Don't work here too well.
And I think that's absolutely true. And this is, in my opinion, that's a huge opportunity, right, for entrepreneurs in Asia to say, like, hey, I understand this market, and whatever, SEMrush, Ahrefs, Moz, HubSpot, Salesforce, they don't understand this market, but I understand this market, and so I can build great things for this market, and I can do so affordably, right? I know the pricing structures, I know how to price things properly, I know how to market them properly. I think that's powerful, right? That's a huge competitive advantage.
Yeah, maybe you should come and start something here, maybe in the future.
I mean, I feel like before I do that, I need to spend, like a decade or two learning the market before I just assume that I know how to build for the Southeast Asian community.
Yeah, we have our own search engine, so we definitely need another Moz here. So that's quite good.
Well, I hope you or someone in your network can build that. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. So like the reason why I bring that up is because, in your book, I love the part where you talk about the importance of diversity and how it shapes your product. So can you tell us your experience with having sort of like a more diverse team?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is, so you bring up a perfect point, right? That if your founders and your team all come from a single background, geographic background, or a certain perspective, right? They just won't be able to target a market that is outside of their comprehension. Great example of this in the United States. I don't know how true this is in other countries, although I'm sure it is at least significant. But at any given time in the United States, there are about 20% of the population has a lot of trouble being ambulatory, like being able to walk without assistance from one place to another. And that's both because, folks who are elderly, folks who break their leg, right? And they have a broken bone, doesn't matter what age they are, folks who have health issues, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it is not the case that the founders at Uber and Lyft for many years, they had no one who had a disability on their executive teams or in their on their strategy and product planning teams, and so they just had no support for this. If you were disabled, well, I don't know what they use. I guess that they can't use us, right? It's super frustrating and just a complete oversight miss. If you had some people in those discussions, in those conversations, who either had those issues themselves or were deeply connected to those communities, there you go, right? You probably get a much more robust, much more thoughtful, intelligent, strategic conversation around, hey, how can we serve those users? And now they're doing a better job, right? But it took a long time. I think that's true for every kind of community, right? There are just fundamental differences between different groups all around the world, geographic differences and disability differences and ethnic background differences, language differences, cultural differences. If they're not represented on your team, you're not going to do a good job representing them to your customers.
Yeah. So you talked about Uber. So Uber sort of merged with a local company here because they to better understand the market, they merged.
Yeah, they felt like they didn't understand. Yeah. I read about that. I think that they're a great example. Yeah.
Yeah. That company is from where I'm from. It's Malaysia. It's got probably the biggest ride sharing company here in the region. So great stuff. Thanks for sharing that. And I think it's very important to have like different point of views and different opinions from the team. And it's what we're trying to grow. And now towards more to like people in marketing. A lot of our digital marketing graduates graduate to become a consultant. They become a marketing consultant, consulting multiple companies, like how you started with Moz, doing websites and doing consulting. So one of the very great chapters in your book is you said how to escape the service hamster wheel. So can you tell the story of how you transitioned from being a consultant to a SaaS model?
Yeah, I mean, I think one really important thing to realize in terms of why Moz was able to transition from services, from consulting to product to software, is that we already attracted the right audience, the right customer base to our website via the content that we created for the software product. Right, so many people, many consultants and agencies and in-house SEOs who needed SEO software were visiting Moz's website already. They knew us, they liked us, they trusted us to provide them with things. So when we launched the software, it had an audience that was receptive to it. And a lot of people who try to make the transition from services, from consulting over to product, think that the same customers who buy their services will also buy their product. And that is almost never true. Almost never true. People who need consulting want consulting. They want a human being. They want a team. They don't want software that you put in front of them that you're like, look, now this does a lot of the things that we were doing for you manually. Okay, maybe it does. I don't care. I don't want to learn a new tool. I want you to do it. That is why I hired you people, right? Human beings to get on the phone with me and deliver reports and come to my offices and talk to me. That's why I need consulting help. If you are trying to sell software to your consulting audience, it usually fails. The reason Moz has worked is because we did not. Almost none of, I don't think any of our consulting clients became software customers. All of our software customers were people who were reading our blog and consuming our content and coming in this different way. So I'd urge a lot of caution there. Don't get fooled into thinking you can just sell one to the other.
Yeah, talking about consulting, I love your chapter where you talked about consulting business. It's not always bad to be in a consulting business.
No, those businesses can be awesome. I have so many, I mentioned this in the book, but I have so many friends who run consulting businesses and, financially speaking, have done much better than I've done building much smaller, but self-owned consulting businesses.
Yeah, great stuff. So one of the things I really want to ask you, and I heard you say this in another podcast, and just a quick one before we go off, is you talk about, you don't always have to build backlinks. You talked about it on the show podcast with Tom Casano. So that's a great interview. So you talked about, the best way to build backlinks is actually to build a brand. And I love your example on that. And so can you tell my audience, how do you build backlinks in 2019?
I mean, I think one of the best ways to consistently earn links without having to work for everyone is to build a company, a product, or a set of content that naturally is built to attract links. What I mean by that is that you are strategically thinking about who are the people who could link to this thing on the web, and why would they do so? And if you have a great answer to that, right? If the answer is, oh, there are lots of reporters who are looking for a story around whatever, a big demographic shift in Asia, or they're looking for stories about serving expats, or they're looking for stories about diversity and inclusion. They're looking for stories about startups that are funded in different ways than venture capital. Okay, we're gonna play all of those threads. We're gonna play all of those angles in our business so that we are naturally attracting coverage, stories, attention, awareness. It doesn't have to be from press, right? You can broaden this out to say, oh, there are lots of websites out there in our space that cover, that link to anyone with an event. Cool. How do we make sure that we are a host of big events? How do we make sure that we consistently have events that lots of people are talking about and linking to? How do we have, if you are in a space where a lot of research work needs to be done and lots of people will link to and point to research, how do we tie our product and our customer data and our, whatever we're building into that research that everyone's looking for? I think when you ask those questions, you can naturally build up a business that is attracting links without you having to do the work every time.
Yeah. Rand, can you give the quick example of I think you said the gelato shop, the Italian gelato shop, that I think to give like a more concrete example to my audience.
Oh, yeah, I'm trying to remember that one. So basically, my cousin-in-law, Marco, started a gelateria here in Seattle, and it was very easy for them to get a lot of attention at the time that they launched because it was an authentic Italian gelateria. He and his father Enzo had taken classes on making gelato in Italy, and they brought over a lot of the methodology. And so of course the Seattle food community, which is I don't know how this is in Asia, but in the United States there's like an obsession with Italian food, right? And so the perception, it just played all the right cards and sort of hit these great reasons for people to write about it. And so, as soon as they launched, right, there was lines out the door just all the time. For the first 2 years, you couldn't go by the place. Even in winter, there's always a line. There you go.
Yeah, and it's when you build a great product, it's also easier to get featured in press, get featured in event sites and news sites. So that's where, if you build a great product and the right word of mouth, that's where you get great backlinks as well.
And it's not just like the right product, but a product that people naturally want to talk about and amplify, right? Yeah. So in some cases, right, if you build a great platform for investor research, investors don't really want to share that with anybody, right? They don't anybody about it, right? So you have to kind of do something more. You have to gear your product to or some aspect of your product or your content to an audience that wants to amplify. And that is fundamentally different from just making a great product. So I think that's what oftentimes where the disconnect comes in. I'll see lots of people saying we have the best product. Yeah, but who wants to talk about it?
Yeah. Great stuff. So thanks for your time, Rand. Last question, and the startup scene or the startup scene and the tech scene is it's already quite emerging here in Asia, and there are a lot of first-time founders and people starting up their own tech company. So what is your advice? So in your book you talk about going through depression and going through the tough times. So what is your advice for entrepreneurs when it comes to going through depression and their own struggles or anxiety?
Yeah, I mean, that issue is different for every different person. And so I don't want to try and say that if you just do this one thing or these few things that it'll solve the problem. That's not the case.
Yeah.
A lot of times with mental health stuff, it is very, very unique to every different person, and what works for some people won't necessarily work for you. But I will say that the things that seem to be most closely correlated with being able to manage those issues, first one is sleep. I think that there's, unfortunately, in the entrepreneurship world, there's people wear a lack of sleep on their shoulder, like it's a badge of honor. Like, oh, I only slept 4 hours last night. I'm working so hard. Look, no offense, but you're an idiot. You are actively hurting yourself. You are making worse decisions, right? There's tons of research about this. Take someone who gets 4 hours of sleep a night, compare them to someone who gets 8 hours of sleep a night, test results, ability to drive well, ability to make good decisions, ability to be thoughtful, ability to make good decisions about hiring, all will be better from this person. And what the hell is your job as an entrepreneur? What is your job? Your job is to make great decisions. So if you want to upgrade the quality of the decisions that you make, get more sleep. Get more sleep and you will massively improve your quality of work. And oftentimes you will be able to avoid a lot of the mental health and burnout and anxiety and depression issues that plague our field. That being said, there are definitely other things. I think that therapy is a wonderful thing, right? Being able to talk to someone professionally about why we do the things that we do, why do we behave in the ways that we behave, and how can we potentially change our behavior by recognizing patterns, unhelpful patterns, self-sabotaging patterns from the past, recognizing why we have those, and then making conscientious efforts to change them in the future. That can be wonderful as well.
Yeah.
I think it's also really good to talk about this stuff. If you are feeling anxiety and depression, talking with your friends, with people who care about you, with people who are going through the same thing is huge, hugely helpful. When you feel alone, I think that's when it really leads to terrible things.
Yeah. I love the story where you told multiple times in your book is where you shared the diagnosis of cancer of your, I'm sorry, is your wife?
Oh yeah, the brain surgery.
Yeah. And it sort of had the reverse effect, and it made the team pull together. Can you briefly tell that story to my audience?
Yeah, I actually have to wrap up real quick, but
sure. Yeah.
But yeah, very briefly, my wife Geraldine was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and I think this is the kind of thing that people don't always share, but I did share that with the team at Moz publicly, and I think that the response, which was an outpouring of love and caring and support, was really really helpful for me, for us, for the team too. Yeah, great stuff. I really value your time. So everyone should get Rand Fishkin's book. It's at the back where Lost and Founder, and everyone in the tech scene or a founder should really get your insights of your experience in running a company such as Moz. So thank you so much, Rand, for your time. Thank you, Bob. Really appreciate you having me. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.